He was the wealthiest man in the room, yet the staff treated him like dirt. And when billionaire Amir Alfred walked into New York's most exclusive restaurant, the manager saw only a foreigner to be mocked and dismissed. The insults were flying, the tension was at a breaking point, and security was seconds away from throwing him out. Until the invisible girl in the corner, the broke waitress, everyone ignored it, something that froze the entire room. Because when she opened her mouth, what came out didn't just save the night. It destroyed the manager's career and revealed a secret that would change everything. And if you think you know where this story is going, trust me, you have no idea. Because this is the story of how one sentence in Arabic cost a man his empire. The rain in Manhattan didn't wash things clean, it only made the grime slicker. And inside the obsidian room, the weather was irrelevant. Perched on the 55th floor of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park, a fortress of gold leaf, velvet, and pretension, where the air smelled of truffle oil and old money. And Cassidy adjusted her apron with a quiet wince as the stiff fabric dug into her waist. Her feet throbbing inside the cheap black flats she'd bought at a discount store 3 months ago, checking her reflection in the polished brass of the espresso machine and seeing dark circles under her eyes, messy brown hair pulled into a severe bun, looking exactly like what she was, exhausted, invisible, desperate, when the sharp voice cut through her thoughts. Cassidy, stop admiring yourself and run table 4. The senator needs his sparkling water, and if it's not San Pellegrino, I will personally see to it that you never work in this zip code again. And the voice belonged to Julian, a man in suits that cost more than Cassidy's annual rent and a soul roughly the size of a mustard seed, snapping his fingers in a way that made Cassidy's teeth clench as she answered, "Yes, Julian." Right away, keeping her voice neutral because she had to. She needed this job. Her mother's medical bill stacked on the kitchen counter in Queens growing taller every week. So she grabbed the chilled bottle and navigated the dining room floor. The obsidian room, a theater where the guests were the audience and the staff were stagehands, expected to create magic without ever being seen. And Cassidy was good at being unseen. She had spent the last 5 years hiding from her past, hiding from her debt, hiding the fact that she was vastly overqualified for pouring water. And as she poured for the senator, a hush fell over the entrance. Heavy oak doors swinging open as a gust of cold wet wind invaded the climate-controlled sanctuary, and a man walked in, tall shoulders filling out a wet trench coat, a dark bespoke suit beneath hinting at power, though his hair was plastered to his forehead from the rain and his shoes splashed with mud. Frantic, dark eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made the hostess flinch as he said, "I need a table," his voice deep, accented, trembling with urgency, and Julian glided over, nose wrinkled as if he smelled something rotting, looking the man up and down, noting the wet hair and lack of reservation, because Julian prided himself on being the gatekeeper of New York's elite, and to him this man didn't look like a master of the universe, but like a tourist who had lost his way. And he said, in clipped, icy British tones, "I'm afraid, sir, that the obsidian room is fully committed this evening. Perhaps there is a TGI Fridays a few blocks down that suits your requirements." And the man stiffened, replying, "You don't understand. I have a meeting. It is vital. I was told a table would be held for Alpha." But Julian let out a short, derisive laugh, not checking the book, not even glancing at the iPad in the hostess's hand, dismissing him with, "We have no record of that, and frankly, with the dress code being strictly enforced, you are hardly in a state to dine without Please step aside. You are dripping on the Italian marble." And from the service station, Cassidy felt a knot tighten in her stomach because she recognized that look in Julian's eye, the one he wore when he enjoyed hurting someone. And the man Alpha didn't leave, instead stepping forward with his hands balling into fists and saying, "I am Amir Alfred. I demand to speak to the owner now," only for Julian to lie smoothly. "The owner is not here, and if you do not vacate the premises immediately, I will have security remove you. We don't tolerate aggression from people like you." The racism subtle and wrapped in polished politeness, but landing like a slap in the air. And Cassidy saw the man's jaw tighten because he wasn't aggressive. He was desperate, and Julian was enjoying provoking him. "Cassidy," Julian hissed, turning his head but keeping his eyes on Amir, "Get Brad. Tell him we have a situation." Brad was the head waiter, a gym-obsessed bully who acted more like a bouncer than a server. Cassidy hesitated. "Julian, maybe we should check the reservation list." "Do not speak to me," Julian snapped, his voice rising enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Do as you are told, you incompetent girl. Get Brad. This man is leaving one way or another." Amir Alfred looked at Cassidy, and for a fleeting second their eyes locked. In his gaze she didn't see a billionaire, she saw a man terrified of losing something precious. She saw a father, perhaps, or a husband at the end of his rope. She remembered her own father years ago begging a landlord for one more week before they were evicted. The humiliation, the rage. Cassidy broke eye contact and looked down. She turned to find Brad, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed this job. She couldn't get involved. But as she walked toward the kitchen, she heard Julian mutter under his breath, loud enough for Amir to hear, "Filthy money doesn't buy class." The atmosphere in the room shifted, moving from tense to dangerous. Cassidy stopped, gripping her serving tray until her knuckles turned white. She couldn't do this. She couldn't just walk away. Brad emerged from the kitchen like a bulldog smelling a steak, a large man pumped full of protein shakes and misplaced aggression. He wiped his hands on a napkin and smirked at Julian. "Problem, boss?" Brad asked, cracking his knuckles. "This gentleman is confused of total," Julian said, inspecting his manicured fingernails. "He thinks he owns the place. Kindly escort him to the elevator. If he resists, well, use your discretion." Amir Alfred stood his ground. He pulled a phone from his Picada sleek, customized device that looked like it cost more than a car and tried to dial. "I am calling the owner. Gregory knows I am coming." Brad swiped his hand, knocking the phone to the floor. It clattered loudly against the marble, the screen shattering on impact. The entire restaurant went silent. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. The senator at table 4 lowered his glasses. This was no longer just a rude encounter. It was an assault. "Oops," Brad grinned, stepping on the phone with his heavy leather shoe. Slippery hands. "Now get out before I throw you out." Amir stared at the broken phone, his face draining pale before flushing a dark, furious red. When he looked up, his eyes blazed with a fire that should have warned them this wasn't just a customer. This was a man used to commanding armies or corporations or nations. "You have made a grave mistake," Amir said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing register. "You do not know what you have just done." "I know exactly what I've done," Julian sneered. "I've taken out the trash." He turned to the other diners, arranging his fake smile into place. "Apologies, everyone. Just a minor disturbance. Please enjoy your rot." "Oh then," Julian switched languages, looking at Brad and speaking in French. It was a common tactic at the Obsidian Room. The staff spoke French to insult customers right to their faces, assuming Americans were too uneducated to understand. "Regarde ce clown," Julian said to Brad in French, laughing. "Look at this clown. He thinks he is a sheikh. He is probably just a taxi driver who won the lottery." Brad laughed, though his French was poor. "Yeah, shall we take him out the service stairs? I could push him a little." Amir didn't react to the French. He just stood there, vibrating with rage, seemingly unable to find the English words to express his fury. He looked isolated, cornered by two bullies in expensive suits. That was when Cassidy moved. She didn't make a conscious decision. It was instinct, honed by years of living in the Middle East as a child, a life she never talked about. Her father had been a diplomat in Dubai and Beirut before the scandal that ruined him. Cassidy had grown up in international schools. She spoke 4 languages fluently. She understood cultural nuances Julian couldn't even dream of. She walked straight past Brad and stepped into the center of the confrontation. "Cassidy," Julian barked, "get back to your station." She ignored him and stopped directly in front of Amir Alfred. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of profound respect. Not servitude, but cultural acknowledgement. When she lifted her head, she didn't speak English. She didn't speak French. She spoke Arabic, a specific dialect, Levantine, refined, the kind spoken by the educated elite. "Sayedi," she said clearly, her voice cutting through the silence of the room. "Sir, please accept my apologies for this shameful behavior." Amir's eyes widened in absolute shock. He stared at the waitress in the stained apron as if she were a ghost. "Jahalatuhum la tamasuma kamak," she continued, her Arabic flowing like water, poetic and sharp. "You do not deserve treatment like this. These ignorant people do not know who you are." The silence in the restaurant became deafening. Julian's mouth hung open. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was authoritative, elegant, everything he wasn't. Amir drew a slow breath, the rage in his shoulders easing slightly as he focused on her, and he replied in Arabic, his voice thick with emotion. "Manakifa Tata Kolaman Lagati, who are you? How do you speak my language?" Amir asked, his voice thick with disbelief. Cassidy replied softly, "Anna, I am just a waitress, sir, but I know dignity when I see it." Then she turned to Julian, and the fear that had been there moments ago was gone, replaced by a cold, unshakable resolve. "He isn't a taxi driver, Julian," she said in English, her voice ringing clearly through the stunned restaurant. and he understands English perfectly, but even if he didn't deserve to have his property destroyed. Julian's face turned a violent shade of purple. You listened to our private conversation. You're fired. Get out now. Take him with you. I don't think so. A new voice boomed across the room, commanding and furious. Every head turned toward the entrance. Standing there, dripping wet from the rain, was a short, balding man in a rumpled suit, Gregory Sterling, the owner of the Obsidian Room, and he looked as if he were on the verge of a heart attack. He had arrived just in time to see Brad smash the phone and to hear Cassidy speak. Mr. Sterling, Julian stammered, his arrogance evaporating into panic. I was just handling a security threat. This waitress. Shut up, Julian, Gregory growled. He brushed past the manager without another glance and hurried toward Amir, nearly collapsing as he reached him. Gregory practically fell to his knees. Your Highness, Sheikh Amir, I am mortified. I was stuck in traffic. I told them you were coming. I swear to you, Your Highness. The words hung heavy in the air. The senator at table 4 audibly gasped. Brad took a step back, his face draining of color. Julian looked as if he might vomit. Amir Alfred did not look at Gregory. He looked at Julian, then at the smashed phone on the marble floor. You have a strange way of welcoming investors, Gregory, Amir said, his English flawless and cold as ice. I came here tonight to sign the papers to acquire this building, to save your restaurant from bankruptcy. He paused, allowing the full weight of that revelation to settle over the room like a stone. But now, he continued, gesturing calmly toward Julian and Brad, I see that the rot in this place is too deep to fix. He turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at Cassidy. What is your name? Cassidy, sir. Cassidy Miller. He nodded slowly. Cassidy Miller. You are the only person in this room with honor. Come with me. Excuse me. She blinked. I said come with me. You are done. Done here. You are fired, remember. His eyes flickered with the faintest trace of dark humor. Unless you prefer to stay with the man who calls guests trash in French. Cassidy glanced at Julian, who was trembling now, then at the guests staring openly at her, then down at the apron she had always hated. With steady hands, she untied the strings, let the fabric fall to the floor, and stepped over it. I'm coming, she said, walking toward the door beside the billionaire. Julian finally found his voice, high and squeaky. Cassidy, you can't leave. We're short-staffed. Amir paused at the doorway and turned once more. Don't worry about the staffing, he said evenly, because, as of tomorrow morning, I am buying the banknote on this property, and my first act as owner will be to turn this room into a parking garage. He held the door open. After you, Miss Miller. They stepped out into the rain, leaving behind a room full of stunned millionaires and a manager whose life had just unraveled. But the story was far from over. In truth, for Cassidy Miller, the nightmare was only beginning. Amir Alfred did not simply want a translator, he needed a witness. And what Cassidy did not yet know was that the phone Brad had smashed contained evidence of a crime far greater than a waiter's cruelty. A crime that involved a very senator seated at table 4. As the heavy door shut behind them, sealing off the warmth of the restaurant, Cassidy felt the sharp realization settle in her chest. She had stepped out of the frying pan and into a fire powerful enough to burn down the entire city. The heavy door of the Rolls-Royce Phantom closed with a solid thud, shutting out the roar of the New York downpour. Inside, the silence was absolute, scented with rich leather and cedarwood. Cassidy Miller perched on the edge of the heated seat, shivering. Her uniform clung to her skin, soaked through, her hair plastered against her skull, and her cheap black flats were soaking into the lamb's wool floor mats. Across from her, Amir Alfred did not look at her. He stared out the tinted window at the towering structure of the Obsidian Room, his hands clenched so tightly on his knees that his knuckles were white. Driver, Amir said at last, his voice low and dangerous, do not move. Circle the block. Keep the building in sight. Yes, sir, the driver replied smoothly, easing the car into traffic. Cassidy wrapped her arms around herself as the adrenaline that had carried her through that confrontation began to drain away, replaced by the crushing reality of what she had done. She had walked out of her job. Her rent was due in 4 days. Her mother's dialysis medication was not covered by insurance. Mr. Alfred, Cassidy began, her voice trembling slightly. I appreciate the ride. You can drop me at the subway station. I need to go home. For the first time since they had left the restaurant, Amir finally turned and looked at her. The fury in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by a calculating, intense focus. He reached into a cooler built into the seat, pulled out a bottle of water, and handed it to her. You cannot go home, Cassidy, he said quietly. Not yet. You were the only one who saw where the pieces fell. The pieces, Cassidy twisted the cap open, her hands trembling. You mean your phone? It's gone. Brad smashed it. It's trash now. The phone is irrelevant. Amir snapped, then deliberately softened his tone. The phone is a device. But inside the case, hidden behind the battery panel, was a micro SD card. It is no larger than a fingernail. Cassidy frowned, trying to process it. Okay, so you lost some photos. I'm sorry, Amir let out a dry, humorless laugh. Photos? No. That card contains the entire digital ledger of the Patriot Fund. It is a charity fund run by Senator Holloway, the man sitting at table 4. Cassidy felt the blood drain from her face. Senator Holloway, the man she had just poured sparkling water for, the man widely tipped to become the next governor. The senator, she whispered. He has been laundering money for an arms cartel through my family's banking division without our knowledge, Amir explained, his voice tightening. I flew in from Dubai personally to confront him. I was going to walk to his table, drop the phone on his plate, and tell him it was over. I wanted to see the fear in his eyes before I called the FBI. He leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers. But thanks to your manager and his waiter, the phone was smashed, and when that brute kicked the debris, I saw the case slide. Slide where? Cassidy asked, her heart beginning to pound. Under table 4, Amir said. Under the senator's feet, Cassidy gasped. If he looks down, if he sees the memory card, he will destroy it, Amir continued. And if he destroys it, I have no proof. My bank will be sanctioned, my family's reputation will be ruined, and a criminal will become governor. I cannot go back in there. Security will stop me at the door, and the commotion will alert Holloway. He looked at her, and the implication hung between them like smoke. You want me to go back? Cassidy whispered. You want me to go back into the place where I just humiliated the manager and quit? You are invisible to them, Amir said, leaning back. You said it yourself. You are just a waitress. To men like Julian and Senator Holloway, you are furniture. You can walk in, you can retrieve the card, you can save everything. Cassidy shook her head frantically. No, no way. Julian will kill me. Brad will throw me down the stairs. I can't. I will pay you, Amir said. It's not about money, Cassidy cried, tears stinging her eyes. It's about I can't take that risk. I have a sick mother. If I get arrested for trespassing, who takes care of her? If I get hurt, who pays the bills? Amir reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook and a gold fountain pen. He wrote quickly, tore off the slip, and slid it across the leather seat. Cassidy looked down and froze. It was a check for $100,000. This is not for the job, Amir said softly. This is for your mother, regardless of what you decide. You stood up for my dignity when no one else would. This is my debt to you. Cassidy stared at the zeros. This was 2 years of rent. This was a kidney transplant list bribe. This was freedom. She lifted her eyes to his and saw the desperation there, buried beneath layers of pride. And then another memory surfaced. Holloway, she said slowly, testing the name. Senator Robert Holloway. Amir nodded. Yes. A cold fire ignited in Cassidy's chest as a memory she had buried for 10 years clawed its way back. Her father, a proud diplomat sitting alone in a dark room, drinking whiskey, holding a letter of termination. Scapegoat, he had said. Holloway needed a scapegoat for the Beirut embassy scandal. Senator Holloway hadn't just laundered money. 10 years ago, his political maneuvering had destroyed Cassidy's father, driving him to suicide. She looked at the check, then back at Amir. I don't want the money, she said, her voice hardening into steel as she pushed it back toward him. Amir's brows lifted slightly. What do you want? I want him to burn, she said. I want him to lose everything. I want him to feel what my father felt. She reached for the door handle, then paused. But I'm keeping the check if I survive. My mom needs a new kidney. Amir smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. Deal now. How do we get you back inside the obsidian room without Julian seeing you? Cassidy pulled her hair tighter, her mind racing through the restaurant's layout, blueprints she had memorized over 3 years of servitude. The front door is suicide, she said. But the garbage truck comes at 9 p.m. The service elevator lock is broken. Brad was supposed to fix it last week, but he was too busy looking at himself in the mirror. She checked her watch. 8:52 p.m. I need a distraction, she said. Can you give me one? Amir picked up the car phone. I am a billionaire, Cassidy. I can buy the power grid if I have to. What do you need? She met his eyes. Cut the lights. Give me 10 seconds of darkness. Amir dialed the number. Done. The service alley behind the skyscraper was a wind tunnel thick with the stench of rotting vegetables and exhaust fumes, and Cassidy stood in the shadows, shivering in her soaked uniform. feeling strangely exposed without the coat she had left behind in the employee locker room. She watched as the massive dumpster truck rumbled off into the night, leaving the heavy steel service doors slightly ajar. Brad really hadn't fixed the lock, and for once his incompetence was useful. Slipping inside, she felt the air shift instantly from cold rain to the suffocating, humid heat of the dishwashing pit, where the noise hit her like a wall, plates clattering, water hissing, chefs shouting orders in Spanish and French in a chaotic symphony of controlled panic. Keeping her head down, she grabbed a stack of dirty napkins from a passing cart and held them in front of her face, blending into the frantic rhythm of the kitchen. A line cook yelled, shoving past her with a tray of seared scallops, and she ducked beneath a hanging rack of copper pots, navigating carefully toward the wait station. She was deep in enemy territory now. If Julian saw her, he wouldn't just yell, he would call the police. He was petty enough to press charges for trespassing. Reaching the edge of the kitchen, she peered through the circular window of the swinging door into the dining room, glowing under candlelight. The storm outside lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows and casting dramatic shadows over the wealthy diners. There was table for Senator Holloway was still seated there, laughing at something said by his companion, a younger woman who was definitely not his wife, leaning back in his chair, his polished shoe resting only inches from a scatter of glass shards and plastic debris, the remains of Amir's smashed phone. Julian hadn't cleaned it up. He had likely left it there as a trophy, a silent message to the room that said, "We crush anyone who doesn't belong." But there was a problem. Julian himself was hovering over the senator's table, pouring a vintage Cabernet and laughing sycophantically at the senator's jokes, while Brad stood guard near the hostess, stand like a gargoyle in a cheap suit. Cassidy pressed her ear to the Bluetooth earpiece Amir had given her in the car. "I'm in position," she whispered, "but Julian is practically sitting in the senator's lap. I can't get to the debris without being seen." Amir's voice came through calm and steady. "Wait for the signal. My contacts at the power company tell me a weather-related surge is about to hit the grid in Sector 4. "How long do I have?" she asked. "The emergency generators will kick in after 8 seconds. "You have 8 seconds, Cassidy. Do not miss." She inhaled deeply and measured the distance from the kitchen door to table 4, about 30 feet across. Marble floors in heels. Impossible. She kicked off her shoes. She would run in her socks. "Ready?" she breathed. 3. Amir counted down. 2, 1. A loud pop cracked through the building, and the restaurant plunged into absolute darkness. The reaction was instant gasps, startled screams, silverware clattering. 100 wealthy people suddenly blind and disoriented. Cassidy moved. She didn't run. She sprinted, keeping low, letting muscle memory guide her through the maze of tables. She knew exactly where every corner was, where the dessert cart stood. 1 second she passed table 2. 2 seconds Julian's voice squawked, "Stay calm. Everyone stay calm." 3 seconds she nearly tripped over a purse strap but recovered. For seconds she reached table 4 and dropped to her knees, sliding across the marble, her hands scrambling blindly over the floor. Cold stone, a shoe, the senator's leg, wet shards of glass. A sharp piece sliced into her thumb, but she didn't stop. She found the jagged plastic of the broken phone casing and tore it open, fingers searching desperately for the battery compartment. 5 seconds. "Where are the lights?" the senator shouted. 6 seconds. Her fingertips brushed something small and metallic, the loose micro SD card, likely dislodged when Brad stomped on the phone. She grabbed it, closing her fists tight, pressing the sharp plastic into her palm to make sure she wouldn't drop it. 7 seconds. The low hum of the backup generators began vibrating through the floor. She couldn't make it back to the kitchen in time. The distance was too great. She rolled sharply to the right, sliding beneath the long draped tablecloth of the empty table 5 beside the senator. 8 seconds. The lights flickered, buzzed, and slammed back on, flooding the room first with harsh emergency brightness before settling into the usual golden ambience. "Apologies. Apologies," Julian called out, waving his arms theatrically. "Just a momentary glitch due to the storm. Complimentary champagne for everyone." Curled tightly beneath table 5, Cassidy clutched the memory card to her chest, her thumb bleeding steadily onto her uniform, her breathing ragged but controlled. She was safe for now. Then she saw a pair of shiny patent leather shoes stop directly in front of her hiding place. "That's strange." Julian's voice drifted down from above. "I could have sworn I felt a breeze go past me." "Probably the air conditioning resetting," Brad grunted. "No," Julian murmured, suspicion sharpening his tone as he walked back toward table 4. Through the narrow gap in the tablecloth, Cassidy watched his shoes shift position. Senator, are you alright? Julian asked. I'm fine, you idiot, Holloway snapped. Just get this trash off the floor. I almost stepped on it. Of course, Senator. Brad, clean this up immediately. Vacuum it. Cassidy stopped breathing. Vacuum it. If Brad vacuumed the exact spot where the phone had shattered and they noticed the memory card was missing, they would know someone had taken it. A smashed phone leaves debris. A missing chip leaves a void. Worse still, Brad dropped to one knee to gather the larger shards of plastic by hand before vacuuming. Cassidy watched his thick fingers sweep across the marble just inches from where she had been moments earlier. Hey boss, Brad muttered. What now? Julian snapped irritably. There's blood here, Brad said. Cassidy's eyes flew to her thumb. The cut was deep, and bright red drops had stained the white marble. Blood. Julian strode over from the spot where he had been smoothing things over with the diners. No, Brad said, lowering his voice. It's wet, it's fresh, and there's a smear leading right there. Brad slowly turned his head toward table 5. He stared directly at the long draped tablecloth hiding Cassidy. There is someone under there, he growled. Cassidy's heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped bird. She glanced around wildly boxed in. To her left, the wall. To her right, the senator's table. In front of her, Brad and Julian. Come out, Julian hissed, careful not to create a spectacle in front of the senator. Whoever you are, come out now or I will drag you out by your hair. She had no choice. If she stayed, they would grab her. If she ran, there was nowhere to run. She touched her earpiece. They found me, she whispered. I have the card, but I'm trapped. Stall them. Amir's voice answered instantly. I am in the elevator. I am coming up. You can't, she breathed. Security, I bought the security company 10 minutes ago, Amir replied evenly. Stall them. Cassidy inhaled deeply, gripping the micro SD card tight in her left fist, hiding it against her palm. She lifted her right hand in surrender and slowly pushed the tablecloth aside, crawling out into the light. The sight of Herschel's soaked hair clinging to her face, blood running down her hand sent a ripple of shock through the room. Cassidy, Julian gasped, and then his shock twisted into a sneer. You came back like a rat, scavenging for scraps. Senator Holloway looked down at her with open contempt. Is this the help you employ? Homeless people, Julian. She was fired, Senator Julian said quickly, face flushed. She's trespassing. Brad, grab her. Brad lunged and seized Cassidy's arm in a bruising grip. She cried out but kept her left hand clenched tight. What are you doing here? Julian demanded, leaning close enough that she could smell the wine on his breath. Stealing silverware, or did you just come back to beg for your job? Cassidy lifted her chin. The fear was there, but the anger burned hotter. She looked straight at Senator Holloway. I didn't come for the silverware, she said, her voice trembling yet clear. I came for the trash. Check her pockets, Julian ordered sharply. She probably stole the tips from the tables. Get your hands off me, Cassidy shouted, struggling as Brad twisted her arm painfully behind her back. Let go of her. The command did not come from the elevator, it came from table 7, where an elderly woman had risen to her feet. A man at table 2 stood as well, but Julian ignored them. Call the police, Brad. Tell them we have a break-in. I don't think that will be necessary. The elevator chimed, and the doors slid open. Amir Alfred stepped out, no longer the drenched, frantic man from an hour earlier. He had changed in the car. Now he wore a fresh tuxedo, one clearly kept for emergencies, and he carried himself like every inch the billionaire oil tycoon he was. He entered not in anger, but with a terrifying calm authority. For men followed behind him, not police, but private security in suits that cost more than the restaurant itself. Amir Julian faltered. You can't come in here. I can, Amir said evenly, walking straight toward them. And I will. He stopped before Brad, his gaze never leaving the waiter's hand gripping Cassidy's arm. Remove your hand from her, Amir said softly, or lose it. Brad glanced at Julian, then at the 4 imposing security men behind Amir and let go. Cassidy stumbled forward, and Amir caught her without hesitation, not caring that her blood stained his tuxedo. He steadied her and looked into her eyes. Do you have it? He murmured. Cassidy gave the smallest nod and slipped the tiny memory card into his palm. Amir closed his fingers around it, and a flash of grim satisfaction crossed his face. Then he turned to Senator Senator, Amir said, voice resonant and commanding. I believe you have something that belongs to the people of New York. Senator Holloway stood slowly, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. I don't know who you are, son, but you're interrupting my dinner. Julian, get this clown out of here. Julian is no longer employed here, Amir replied calmly. He pulled a document from inside his jacket and tossed it onto the table. It landed squarely in the risotto. That is the deed to the building, Amir continued, and the acquisition papers for the restaurant group. I signed them electronically 5 minutes ago. I own the chair you are sitting on, Senator. I own the fork in your hand, and I own the server logs for the Wi-Fi. The room went deadly silent, and so Amir continued, stepping closer to the senator. Get out of my restaurant. Holloway laughed nervously. You bought a restaurant just to kick me out. You have too much money and too little sense. Elliot, I didn't buy it just to kick you out, Amir said, holding up the tiny memory card between his thumb and forefinger, and the color drained from Holloway's face because he recognized the card, his eyes darting to the floor where the phone had been. I bought it, Amir said, so I could control the security cameras, which I am sure have a lovely view of you accepting a bribe from the union boss last Tuesday. But this card is just the icing on the cake. Holloway lunged in a desperate, foolish move, trying to grab the card from Amir's hand, but Amir didn't even flinch. One of his security guards moved like lightning, intercepting the senator and pinning his arm behind his back. Assault, Amir noted calmly. On top of money laundering and racketeering, the police are waiting downstairs. Robert, I suggest you go quietly. Julian, realizing the tide had turned, tried to slink away toward the kitchen. Ah, Julian, Amir said without turning around. Where are you going? Julian froze. I was just going to check on the dessert. You're staying right here. Cassidy spoke up then, stepping away from Amir and holding her bleeding hand. Because we need to talk about my severance pay. The arrest of a sitting senator is a messy business. But in the Obsidian Room it was handled with the quiet efficiency of high society. The police didn't storm in with guns drawn. They were escorted up by air security. Detective Graves, a weary-looking man who seemed like he had seen it all, took one look at the micro SD card and the sobbing senator and nodded. We've been trying to nail him for 3 years, Graves said to Amir. We just needed the ledger. You just did the DOJ a hell of a favor. As Holloway was led away in handcuffs, screaming threats about lawsuits and knowing the president, the dining room dissolved into hushed whispers. The show was over, but the aftermath was just beginning. Julian stood by the Motor D stand looking small and deflated. Brad had already vanished, fleeing out the back door the moment the cuffs clicked around the senator's wrists. Amir walked over to Julian. The former manager tried to straighten his tie, tried to summon some of his old arrogance, but it crumbled under Amir's steady gaze. Mr. Alford, Julian stammered. Clearly mistakes were made, emotions were high. If you had known I was rich, you would have been kind. Amir finished for him. That is not an apology, Julian. That is a confession of your character. Amir looked around the restaurant. The staff there, busboys, the other waitresses, the bartenders were all watching, terrified, expecting the new owner to fire everyone. This man, Amir announced, pointing at Julian, ran this place on fear. He stole your tips. He insulted your heritage. He treated you like cattle. The staff nodded slowly, and one brave dishwasher murmured, It's true. He is fired, Amir declared, and he is blacklisted from every property I own, which includes half the hotels in this city. Julian gasped. You can't do that. I have a mortgage. You should have thought of that before you called my guest trash. Cassidy said, stepping up beside Amir, her hand now bandaged and wrapped in a linen napkin. Julian glared at her with pure hatred. You little snitch. You ruined everything. No, Julian, Cassidy said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. You ruined it yourself. I just turned on the lights. Amir gestured to security. Remove him. As Julian was dragged out kicking and screaming like a child, a cheer erupted from the kitchen, low at first, and then swelling until the staff came out clapping. Even the wealthy diners, realizing that cheering for the hero was the socially acceptable thing to do, joined in. Amir raised a hand for silence and turned to Cassidy. Well, he said, we have a restaurant, we have no manager, and we have a room full of hungry people. Cassidy looked at the chaos, at the staff who were now looking to her for guidance. She knew the table numbers. She knew the wine list. She knew the schedule. I can run the floor for tonight, she said. But I'm not wearing that apron, Amir smiled. Agreed. But first, there is one more thing. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his backup phone, scrolled for a moment, and showed the screen to Cassidy. It was a news alert. Breaking, investigation reopened into the death of diplomat Arthur Miller. New evidence links Senator Holloway to the framed embezzlement charges. Cassidy stared at the screen, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. You knew, she whispered, about my father. I suspected. Amir said gently. When I saw your last name and I knew Holloway's history, I had my team dig while we were in the car. Holloway destroyed your father to cover his first crimes. Tonight, you avenged him. Tears spilt down Cassidy's cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. For the first time in 10 years, the heavy cloud of shame that had hung over her family name simply evaporated. Thank you, she choked out. Do not thank me, Amir said. Now, Miss Miller, please tell the kitchen to fire the senator's steak. I believe I am quite hungry. 6 months had passed since the night the lights went out at the Obsidian Room. The winter slush of New York had melted into a humid golden summer, and the restaurant was unrecognizable. It was no longer called the Obsidian Room. The dark, oppressive velvet and black marble were gone, replaced by warm sandstones, teal accents, and floor-to-ceiling windows that let the sunset flood the space. It was now named Ongyor the Light. Cassidy Miller stood on the balcony overlooking the dining floor. She wasn't wearing a stained apron or cheap flats. She wore a tailored cream pantsuit that fit her perfectly, her hair styled in loose, confident waves. On her wrist was a Cartier watch, a gift not from a man but one she had bought herself with her first performance bonus. She wasn't just the manager anymore. She was the managing partner with a 10% equity stake in the business. Miss Miller. Cassidy turned. It was Carlos, the new head waiter, young, eager, and terrified of making a mistake, just as she once had been. Yes, Carlos. Is everything okay with table 6? Yes, ma'am. But there is a man at the service entrance. He says he knows you. He looks bad. Cassidy frowned and checked her tablet. I'm not expecting any vendors. Did he give a name? He said to tell you it's the man who made you. Cassidy's expression hardened. She handed the tablet to Carlos. Watch the floor. I'll handle this. You'll walk through the kitchen. The chefs greeting her with smiles and respectful nods, a stark contrast to the fear they used to show Julian. She pushed open the heavy steel service door into the alley. Julian was leaning against the brick wall. He looked 10 years older. His suit was ill-fitting and shiny with wear, and he held a lit cigarette with shaking fingers. He had been blacklisted just as Amir had promised. No reputable restaurant in the city would hire him. Rumor had it he was working the night shift at a motel in New Jersey. Hello, Julian, Cassidy said, crossing her arms. You're trespassing. Julian looked up and sneered. Look at you. The Queen of Manhattan. You think you're special, don't you? You're just a charity case, the Arab picked up. I'm the woman who runs the most profitable restaurant in the tri-state area. Cassidy corrected him calmly. What do you want? I want a reference, Julian spat. I have an interview at a steakhouse in the Bronx. They want to know why I left the Obsidian Room. You're going to write me a letter saying, I resigned due to creative differences. Cassidy laughed, a genuine, incredulous sound. You want me to lie for you after you tried to frame me for theft? After you treated my father's memory like dirt? If you don't, Julian stepped forward, his eyes wild. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them you and Alpha set the senator up, that you planted that memory card. It was a desperate, hollow threat. The senator was already in federal prison, and the evidence against him had been overwhelming. Go ahead, a deep voice rumbled from the shadows of the alley. Julian froze. A black SUV had pulled up silently, and the rear door opened as Amir Ali stepped out. He had been in Dubai for 3 months, overseeing his family's oil merger. Cassidy hadn't seen him since the airport. He looked even better than she remembered, and imposing, radiating a power that made Julian shrink against the wall. Amir, Julian squeaked. Mr. Ali to you, Amir corrected coolly. He walked over and stood beside Cassidy, not looking at Julian but at her instead. Is this trash bothering you, partner? Just old refuse that missed the garbage truck, Cassidy said, her heart racing at his neck. Amir turned to his driver. Security. 2 men stepped out. Julian, Amir said, his voice bored. If you ever come within 500 feet of Ms. Miller or this building again, I will buy the motel you work at and fire you from that, too. Do we understand each other? Julian threw his cigarette down and scrambled away, muttering curses as he disappeared into the city that had chewed him up and spat him out. Amir watched him go, then turned back to Cassidy, the hardness in his eyes melting instantly. You look. He paused, searching for the word in English, then settled on Arabic. Sahara enchanting. You're late, Cassidy said, smiling while hiding her trembling hands behind her back. The grand reopening dinner started an hour ago. I had to make a stop, Amir said softly. For you. He reached into his pocket. Cassidy expected a ring box, expected jewelry. Instead, he pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper, old, creased, and covered in stamps. What is this? Cassidy asked. My legal team found it in the archives of the State Department. Amir said softly. It is your father's original resignation letter, the one they forced him to sign. Amir took a lighter from his pocket and flicked the flame. It is the last record of his shame, Amir said. I thought you might want to be the one to destroy it. Cassidy took the lighter, her hands shaking as she held the corner of the paper that had defined her family's tragedy for a decade, and she lit the edge. They stood there in the alley, the billionaire and the former waitress, watching the paper curl into black ash and drift away on the warm summer breeze. He's gone, Cassidy whispered, feeling the final weight lift from her chest. He's really gone. The past is gone, Amir agreed, taking her hand. Now we have a dinner to attend, and I believe table 1 is reserved for the owners. The dinner was a triumph. Critics were already raving about the fusion of American and Levantan cuisine. The ambience was flawless. Yet Cassidy could barely focus on the food because she was acutely aware of Amir sitting across from her. For 6 months their relationship had been strictly professional, mostly emails about profit margins, renovation blueprints, staffing schedules. There had been late-night video calls that lasted a little too long to be purely business, pauses where neither of them wanted to hang up, but nothing had been spoken aloud until tonight. When dessert, a cardamom-spiced chocolate lava cake, was cleared away, Amir signaled for the music to lower. Cassidy, he said, I have a confession. If it's about the budget overruns on the patio, I already fixed it. She joked nervously. It is not about the patio. Amir leaned forward. That night, 6 months ago, I did not come to the Obsidian Room just to buy the building. Cassidy slowly set down her water glass. You didn't? No, Amir said. I had been looking for you for 2 months. Cassidy blinked. Me, why? My father worked with your father in Beirut, in the Noventa, Amir revealed. When whispers of Holloway's corruption began circulating in our circles, my father remembered Arthur Miller. He remembered a man of honor who was destroyed. He told me to find Arthur's family and make it right. Cassidy felt stunned. So you knew who I was when you walked in? I knew Arthur Miller had a daughter named Cassidy, Amir said, shaking his head gently. But I did not know she was the waitress being screamed at by a manager. When I walked in, yes, I was angry at the service. But when you spoke Arabic, when you showed that fire, I knew I had found her. He reached across the table and took her hand. I came to give you money, to pay a debt of honor, Amir said quietly. But I stayed because I fell in love. The room seemed to blur at the edges. I do not want a business partner, Cassidy, Amir continued, his voice rough with emotion. I have enough business partners. I want a partner for life. I want you to come to Dubai with me, not as an employee, not as a guest. He slid a small velvet box across the table. I was told American women preferred diamonds, he added with a wry smile, but I know you prefer history. Cassidy opened the box. Inside was not a generic diamond solitaire, but a ring set with a deep blue sapphire surrounded by intricate gold calligraphy. It belonged to my grandmother, Amir said. The inscription reads, "Loyalty is the crown of the soul." Cassidy looked at the ring, then at the man who had changed her world. She thought about the rain, the broken phone, the fear, the triumph. She thought about her mother, now recovering at home with a new kidney, her bills paid, her life saved. She met Amir's eyes. I can't go to Dubai, she said softly. Amir's face fell, and he began to pull his hand back. I understand. Your life is here. This restaurant. I can't go to Dubai, Cassidy repeated, a slow smile spreading across her face. Unless we hire a really good manager to replace me here, because I'm not letting this place go downhill. Amir let out the breath he had been holding, his laugh booming through the restaurant. He stood, pulled Cassidy to her feet, and kissed her a kiss that sealed the deal better than any contract ever could. The diners erupted into applause. They didn't know the whole story, the senator, the spy games, the revenge. They simply saw a happy ending. But for Cassidy, it wasn't an ending at all. It was the first chapter of a life she finally owned. And even now, thinking back to that moment in the alleyway, it sends chills down the spine. It just goes to show that you never truly know who you're speaking to, and you never know when the person you're mistreating is quietly holding the keys to your destruction. Cassidy proved that dignity and courage are worth more than any billionaire's bank account. What would you have done if you were in Cassidy's shoes? Would you have risked everything to get that memory card, or would you have taken the check and walked away? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And subscribe with notifications on so you never miss another story of instant karma and real-life revenge. Until next time, stay kind or be prepared to pay the price.